Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Nabil Al-Ghouri, Executive Director of CAMFT. And with me, I've got Katie Vernoy, who is President of CAMFT for 3 more days.
3 whole days.
3 whole days, your term ends May 31st.
Yes.
Then you become past president.
Yes. I'll still be around.
So we are happy to host this free Lunch and Learn series to support our members. While we are waiting for more people to log in, we have a poll. So let's put up this poll right now. And a reminder to folks, while we're waiting for that, use the Q&A feature to type in your questions and upvote. Okay, so what new self-care practice did you find during quarantine? Baking, I have sourdough starter and I'm not afraid to use it. Cleaning and organizing, my closets would impress even Marie Kondo. Gardening, I've created my own at-home garden that will sustain me if the apocalypse truly comes. Or something else. You are too weird, Katie.
Yeah, I figured that I was just talking about ones that I had heard of or that I do. So I am a bit weird. So I'm sure there's other things that people
embrace your weirdness. Embrace it. Right?
I am fascinated with my sourdough starter. It just is like this whole thing. It's like this little chemistry set.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I'm into my air fryer right now. Like air fryer is the thing, and it makes amazing.
I could see how that would be pretty tempting. I think making my own tortilla chips could be coming down the pike. So I could probably need to get kale chips. Oh my goodness.
Okay, so let's get the poll. 39% said something else. You're too weird, Katie.
I know, I'm totally weird.
30% said cleaning and organizing. 17% said gardening, and 14% said baking. Very nice.
So I'm in the 14% because I'm totally fascinated with my sourdough starter.
Okay, so let me start by thanking Geico, CPH, and Simple Practice. Thank you very much for being our sponsors of the Lunch and Learn webinars. While this is not a CE event, please visit CAMFT and our online learning library for a variety of recorded clinical, legal, and ethical workshops to earn your CEs. The website is www.camft.org/self-study. Okay, use the Q&A features. So enter questions and then upvote questions. I see we have 6 questions already. And we've got over 200 people online. So thank you, welcome everyone. So now I'd like to introduce Katie Vernoy. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a current president of CAMFT. She has a therapy practice as well as a consulting practice. You might have heard her on the Modern Therapist podcast, and she has her own conference. What's the name of the conference, Katie?
Therapy Reimagined.
Therapy Reimagined, which is a lovely name, and you have a great lineup every year. So without further ado, do you want to say anything before we get started?
I do. I have a little bit of intro that I wanted to start with. So I think, why was I asked to do this? And I think one is that I both before we went into shelter in place, I had a virtual and in-person, so a hybrid practice. I also was hybrid private pay and insurance. I'm also hybrid therapy and consulting, and I have a past working in community mental health as a director of intensive services. So as you may have guessed, I've experienced positions. So it means that I am very, very focused on trying to get not just burnout prevention, but also how we can optimally perform. And so that we were able to thrive during this time, or at least do as well as we can so that we're not completely burnt before the end of the crisis. So that's all I wanted to say with you.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna go, right now it's 12:04. We're gonna go about 5 minutes after 12:30 so we can get 30 minutes worth of questions. Okay. So let's start off with, what are the unique challenges of doing most or all of your sessions on a virtual platform?
I think the first one, excuse me, the first one that I think a lot of people, I see this in all the Facebook groups and that kind of stuff, are just the physical elements of it. So we have kind of the button seat time. And it's not as, especially depending on if you're using a plugged in headset or if you're using other things, like you may be more sedentary than you typically are. You're not going out to a waiting room to pick people up, that kind of stuff. And I think those are pretty, and there's eye strain. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that can happen that's physically kind of difficult. I'm sure regardless of the platform, there's technical glitches or, you know, kind of teaching our folks how to take care of the technical situation. And it just takes a lot more weight. It's a lot more difficult to navigate that in addition to connecting with your client.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are seeing this, and I think this is both because of the virtual platform as well as the pandemic and the crisis that we're currently in. People are overscheduling because I don't have to do a commute. I don't have to, you know, kind of do extra stuff, and maybe I need the money. Maybe there's
fear of the economy kind of stuff. Yeah.
And for folks in community mental health, there may be folks that are able to see clients versus not able to see clients, and so caseloads are probably skyrocketing. And so when we overschedule, especially if we're in a virtual platform where we're being more physically sedentary, the physical effects can be harder, but also the emotional effects. And these are two things that I added yesterday as I was thinking about this, because I was on my sessions yesterday and I realized I have to really put my together to go into an office, right? And I'm sitting across from someone and my office is clean for the most part, all that stuff. There is unseen clutter on my desk right now. And that's impacting how I'm interacting with this right here. I also, everything's closed right now, but as soon as I log off, I can immediately pull up my email or social media or news. And so we are so connected, like I'm actually using it for my benefit because I have my electronic health platform. I immediately do my note. I potentially refer to it and take notes because I've got my screen going. But like, it also means that I'm trying to do even the little tiny moments between sessions, I'm going to email or social media, and that's just that constant drain, constant screen time, a lot of
rather than that natural transition where you go walk to get the next patient, maybe you go to the bathroom for a minute, you know, just get a glass of water. But you asked something that I think is, there was a segue in a question in one part of your answer. How can you shift your schedule as a therapist to support yourself and provide stronger sessions for your clients? You talked about some people maybe actually seeing more clients, but let's talk about scheduling.
So I do this in person or when I'm doing the hybrid practice, but I think it's something where it's even more important when you're virtual is really identifying how many sessions you can do in a row. Okay. I actually only do 2, maybe 3 in a row, and then I take a longer break. So I'll do 2 sessions, do a 30-minute break, maybe do another 1 or 2 sessions, take a lunch or dinner or whatever, and then I'll take another session. Like you want to have times where you can hopefully get outside, potentially get some food, walk around, but you want to make sure that you identify what that time frame is for you, so that you're not scheduling like you would back to back to back. Because hey, this is the day I'm in the office. And so I'm going to see all the clients and then I'm going to come home and pass out. Like you can't do that in this environment. And so being able to actually identify, like, how often do I need a break? Do I need to be really strict with that 50-minute hour so that I can take my eyes off a screen for 10 minutes in between? Like I'll go stand outside, close my eyes and stand in the sun just to get a little bit of a different thing. I'll look far away. I'll try to get a different focal length. Like I think it's really important to do whatever you can, because the physical effects, but also the mental and emotional effects. Like you're going into people's homes, you're potentially seeing other folks. And so I think that's really important. I have other things on schedule, so I want to actually get to that really quickly. There are logistical things. I know folks they have kids or spouses that are also using Wi-Fi, or roommates or partners, whatever it is. If they're logistical things, some of this is going to potentially sound really tone deaf. So I want to honor that people are going to have to take care of things in their logistical reality. And so potentially that's looking at what is actually available, what is actually possible. Are there agreements that you can make with the other folks in the household, either for time for privacy or time for Wi-Fi access or whatever it is. But I think also looking at as much as possible, so kind of controlling for logistical efforts. There's also kind of making sure that you optimize your schedule. Okay. And so there are times when you are most energetic. There are times when you're most creative. There are times when you're able to do, you know, kind of different types of projects and potentially setting up a system so that you can get your notes done so you're not holding that. The books that I've read as far as optimizing that I would really recommend, one is When by Daniel Pink. Another one is Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
The very difficult name. Yes, I know.
Yes. Deep Work by Cal Newport is really great because it talks about how long you can actually do dedicated work. And I think that's another thing when you're on a session, is that it's actually more intense focus because you're having to engage more with your client. And so you want to make sure that you don't put too much of that back to back because you're not going to be able to sustain the focus. And then I'm trying to think if there's other ones. Oh, and then there's also making sure that you do make time for rest. And so you have to account for all of the stresses that you have. So if you have childcare and, you know, doing homeschooling and chores and, you know, kind of office work and therapy and that kind of stuff, you want to make sure that you also have rest time, which I think a lot of people don't include. And peak performance is where they talk about, like, you have to actively rest and actively stress your system. So it's okay to be stressed out and working at a rapid pace. You just also need to have the requisite rest in order to keep sustaining that and to build stamina to be able to do the level of work that you're doing.
Okay, so we're gonna ask you one more question, then we're gonna go to the Q&A. Reminder for folks, put questions in the Q&A and upvote by hitting the like button. What systems need to be in place to make your practice grow stronger, as well as when we start to go back into our offices?
I think a lot of folks identified some gaps in their systems when they went virtual, if they did. I think one of the biggest pieces is not having a real strong mechanism to schedule your clients. Not have a great mechanism to intake new clients, because sending physical paperwork really is very onerous, or making copies or you know, any of those things. And there's also folks that don't have payment systems in place. And so, you know, if they're like, do I have a client send me a check at my house? I mean, like there's very different things. And so for me, I think it really comes down to making sure that all of that from onboarding a client all the way through to termination, that you have it automated as much as possible. I definitely use an electronic health record and it does all of those things. One of our sponsors, in fact, Simple Practice. But I think it's also looking at, have you actually set everything up so that, like, making sure that your policies are updated so that you have all of those things aligned can be very, very helpful. And I think any emails or different things that you do frequently, creating templates. But oftentimes we don't see this until we have absolutely no time, or we don't have the same access to somebody sitting in a room. And so I think you don't have to do it all at once. Please don't do it all at once, because that's overwhelming. But I started identifying what are the things that I can add, what are the systems I can put in place to make my life easier. And I think that will serve you now, because then you can literally, if your practice is kind of running itself in the background, you can sit down and do a session and then go back to what you need to do, versus, okay, I need to sort through this and I need to have this ready. And then, like, oh yeah, I need to create that email. And I like, when you're doing too much of that kind of recreating the wheel every time that you have a different interaction with a client, it's much harder.
So we're going to start asking questions from the chat, from the Q&A. Just as a reminder, CAMFT is an affinity partner with Simple Practice, whom you mentioned, and we'll put that link in the chat feature so everyone has that. If you sign up for Simple Practice through CAMFT, you'll get 2 free months, which is a month longer than the regular sign up. So it's a great way to take advantage of a good platform. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question that I saw posted. So it's not the top question right now, but I will get to those top questions. And the first question was from Kate Bosworth. I'm in grad school, starting field study in the fall at 20 hours per week. I am feeling anxious and wondering if you have any tips how to balance practicum with 2 classes, group supervision, part-time paid work, an RA position, a certification program, maintaining a relationship with my spouse, and self-care. How do you do it all? Feeling overwhelmed, but wanting to do it all. I'm overwhelmed just reading that list. So, Katie, what tips do you have?
So I think there are a few things that come to mind. Some of those things potentially are congruent, and so that you can kind of batch them together. And so, you know, looking at how, if you're able to get a paid practicum, which I know is unheard of, then you may not have to have this extra paid gig. If you have to have the paid gig, can you have it support your career and continue with resume building? I think as far as navigating all the pieces, I think it's actually putting a calendar together to see what is actually possible, because we can say, well, I'm going to do this, and this, and that's great. But if it doesn't actually fit into a calendar, you're not actually doing those things. And so being able to identify, where does all of this stuff fit, you know, including the time to do papers, to do debriefing after a tough day of therapy, like making sure you have all of those things in there.
Notes.
And I think
time for your notes.
And time for your notes, and time for your spouse, and time for just yourself to sit as a lump on the couch. I think if you can't fit everything in, take everything out of the calendar again and start with the most important things and put those in first. This is Stephen Covey's Big Rocks. If you can look that up, and then kind of identify, as you know, put the second most important thing, the third most important thing, and identify what you can actually do. If you overcommit, there are several things that can happen. One is you're just going to feel crappy all the time and like you're incompetent. So don't do that to yourself. The other thing is that if you've committed to someone who's going to do something and you don't show up, that negatively impacts your reputation, and people will stop trusting you. And so I think it's really important to get really clear on what you need to do now and what can wait 6 months or a year or 5 years. If you're brand new in this field, you have time. You don't need to do it all right now.
I think there's a good segue to the next question, which is currently the top rated question. Hannah Bondi asks, I'm curious to hear feedback on compassion fatigue and ways to manage burnout during this time. So you answered a question about grad students, but I really feel that answer is universal to everyone. And, you know, so talk to us about compassion fatigue as well.
I think that there are a lot of different elements to compassion fatigue. I think some of it is not really having any resilience or emotional bandwidth left and feeling like you're giving it to your clients, and you become either more sensitized to the client material or less sensitized to the client material. And so I think the solutions are going to be a little bit individual. But I think one thing that's really clear is that there is trauma and secondary trauma that we're all experiencing at some level. And so if you're not processing that with a supervisor, or processing that with colleagues, or processing it with your therapist, that vicarious trauma will then start really negatively impacting your ability to have compassion for your clients. You'll start having your own PTSD responses. You'll start having your own complex trauma responses. And so I think it's important that you're finding time to process what's going on in a place that's safe, that you can actually talk about the real deal. Because there's sometimes when we're looking at in our sessions with our clients, some of it, you know, there was a period of time where it was like, how do you navigate shelter in place? How do you navigate shelter in place? It was like, how do you navigate how to you know, have less financial resources? How do you navigate that? You know, like everything was pretty much the same. Now folks are really like, there's the quarantine fatigue. People are actually getting used to the platform. We're going deeper into mental health work. And so I've been dealing with clients that have been worried about suicidality. I've been with clients that are starting to venture back into the workplace and worried about their safety. I'm talking with folks who are experiencing racism. You know, I think there's a lot of stuff that there's the survival needs of how do I manage shelter in place, and how do I stay alive and not get COVID? How do I financially survive this? Those things have started going to the background, and there's some heavy stuff. And we're all dealing with financial, you know, shelter in place. And so I think it's something where it's more and more important to get that emotional support and the opportunity to process as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. I think that those are wonderful pieces of advice, suggestions. Okay, let's go to another question. Sarah Haney, any words of advice on how to manage boundaries with clients who may want to return to in-person sessions before we as therapists feel safe enough or ready to do so? For example, those of us therapists who are ourselves part of at-risk groups. You know, I count myself as one of those. I have 2 high-risk factors for COVID, and I'm reluctant to go back into the office. So what are your thoughts?
I think it's something where there's some different mechanisms in making that decision. For myself, I have asthma. I actually started sheltering in place early.
Mm-hmm.
I had the conversation with my clients, and so they're aware of that particular reason why I'm going to be continuing this practice. I think some of it is how it's presented. This is how therapy is being provided right now. And it's something where you can talk with them about the pros and cons for them staying in telehealth, and whether or not it makes sense for them to stay with you, or if they would like to be referred to a clinician that's going back into the office. I know it's heartbreaking to think about losing clients, but I think sometimes that may be what the right match is if they can't get the privacy they need, if they can't navigate the technology well, if there are dangerous reasons that they can't do telehealth from their home. And so I think if, you know, or if telehealth just isn't appropriate, like there's psychotic symptoms or there's other things where this platform would not be appropriate. So I think if you frame it as, this is what I'm doing, this is the benefit I see from it, and let's talk about your choice about what you would like to do with it, I think it kind of sets the boundary inherently. I think the other element of it is that if you're deciding not to go back to your office, and you really feel strongly that they shouldn't be in an office either. I mean, there's some folks that feel very strongly about this. Right. I think that there's data and different things about 2 people sitting in a room talking for 45 to 60 minutes that suggests that it may not be advised. And so you may also be able to share with them your concerns about that in more of a data-driven way and have that conversation if you feel like you need to push them in one direction or the other. I don't personally have that commitment. I do think people need to be safe, but I think each person's going to need to make their decisions and weigh what the odds are, because there's people in all different areas. There's places that have, like in LA, lots of cases, lots of deaths. There are other places where there's been barely any cases and deaths. So, and I think you want to make sure that you're having a real conversation with real data with your clients and letting them know what their options are, and being willing to gently and compassionately refer them to someone else who's going to be in the office if that's the choice they want to make. Great.
I'm hearing from our staff that attendees want the list of the books that you referred to. So
I will share that, sure.
Share that with us, and we will get it to you out in an email after the workshop. So give us a couple days for that, but we will get that list out. Okay, so Jennifer Linehan says, how does a therapist manage taking their own mental health or sick day with clients? I work with kids, and if I were to tell them I'm taking a day off, there's a lot of questions and concerns, possibly due to anxiety, either their anxiety. So what are your thoughts on that?
I honestly have struggled with this myself, because I want to be present for my clients. I want to, I want to make sure that my income stream continues, because I think part of my value is access, but it's also customer care. And so if my clients want extra sessions, if they want me to be available for them, but burnout is a real thing. And I think especially with the types of things that we're facing as a society right now in so many different ways, and I won't go into that element of it, I think that there's a piece of, you must take time off. And so I want to just kind of think about the individual conversations that you might have about taking it off. It would be potentially, you may also decide to take a week off, except for some of the high-risk clients that you don't feel comfortable not seeing. I don't know that, you have to determine how much time off you need. But I think it's having the conversation person to person. For kids, you can talk about, how sometimes you're done with work and you need recess? Well, I'm going to take some recess right now. I need to make sure that I'm feeling better, so that when we meet up again in 2 weeks, that I'll be ready to play again. Or I'll be ready to talk again. I mean, I think it's framing it for the client. I think a lot of my clients, adult clients, are finding that they're because this continues on, that they're taking time off from work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so talking with them about it and talking about, like, I want to take some time off. This is, you know, I had a trip scheduled, I've canceled it, but I do need to take some time away so that I can be fresh and available.
Right.
And doing the same things you would do if you weren't actually home, if you don't want to be on call, you know, having your backup person so that they can take your calls, making sure that you give instructions so that they can get support while you're gone. So you're not leaving them, you're just giving yourself some space to rest.
Right. I mean, if this is, you know, the real question is, how long is this? I've thought of this as a marathon, and what mile are we on? I personally think we're at mile 2, but some people may think we're at mile 13. But even in a marathon, you have to pace yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is the mental health days. I actually, as executive director of CAMFT, I've given every staff member at CAMFT one free mental health day. And I'm encouraging them to work with their supervisor to schedule it, but everyone should take a day off. And I value that as someone supporting mental health professionals. Mm-hmm. So now we're gonna ask a question I think that is, that some people may have, is what about when you don't have extra or free time because you actually work all 8 hours at home and are really tired, exhausted? I kind of resent hearing others who have extra time. You know, that's an interesting question.
Oh, I feel that too. I mean, I have my therapy practice, which has grown because of people wanting to come back, because I take insurance and a lot of people aren't accepting insurance. And I have my consulting business, and I'm planning a conference, and I'm doing podcast interviews, and I'm doing stuff for CAMFT. I do my sourdough starter on the weekend, and it's currently in the fridge. Like, I'm not doing these things every single day. It's not like I'm in the lap of luxury, living my best quarantine life, because that pisses me off too. I get that.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
I think most of us are finding that our schedules, at least for me, I'm finding my schedule has basically stayed fairly similar, too much. But I think when we're looking at other folks, and I think part of this is it's that ability to see what's happening in everybody else's lives that is really, I need to make sure that I'm not comparing what I'm doing with someone else, because I think then there's resentment, and I think for myself anyway, there's jealousy. You know, I see folks who are continuing to get paid a salary who get to watch Netflix all day. Now, I don't know that they're doing that, and I certainly don't think that that's common, but I think there's especially in the beginning, there was this impression that we all had all this extra time. We may have decreased commutes, but we may have more responsibilities at home. So the idea that we may have extra time is really, really faulty. And I think I'll go back to kind of the previous answer, rather than looking at what other people are doing, which is hard, people are coping by sharing their life all over the place. Identifying what it is that you're doing, what can wait, what has to happen, what's going on, some of the self-care that is viable for you. You know, if you're working an 8-hour day, there still should be opportunities to take breaks, even if it's 5 minutes. There are times when I'll have a 5-minute break and I'll just walk outside, and then I'll come back in. There's times I'll have a 5-minute break and I will just stand up and stretch. Like, where are the breaks that you can find, and how joy and meaning for yourself right now versus it feeling like a grind and Groundhog Day. Because I think it's different for each person, and I think that there's no one answer. And I know it's not easy, but I think it's really getting out of the place of comparison, because there are a lot of folks that are having very different experiences. And while I feel very privileged that I still have income, and I feel privileged that I get to work, I also feel a little resentful that I have to do so much of it.
I know. I mean, I was working super duper hard, and my partner was furloughed, you know, and so he really was sitting around, you know, reading, and I'm doing webinar after webinar and crisis planning and talking people off ledges. You know, it is hard balancing that. Yeah. Okay, we're at 12:30. We're gonna go 5 minutes longer. So I'm gonna try to answer as many questions as we can. So let's try to. So we'll do.
I'll keep them shorter. I'll be shorter, Nabil.
Nancy says, I'm scheduled to take the MFT exam in August. Suggestions to be able to prepare under increased stress with working during COVID.
So Not an easy one. I think it's sorting out how you best study and seeing if there's a way that you can protect your concentration during that time. I know for myself, and this was a million years ago, but I was taking one of my exams. I don't remember if it was the first or the second one, and we were remodeling our house. And my husband was basically yelling at the plumbing while I'm trying to study. And so what I ended up doing is putting on, and this is how long ago, a Discman with a headset and walking around my neighborhood listening to the content so that I could actually focus.
Yeah.
And I was getting some self-care time. I think it's sorting out, is there a place, some protected time where you can actually study effectively and make sure that you set yourself up for success. Eat food, drink water, make sure you've had a break, you know, that kind of stuff before you really dig in, and keep study sessions to like 6.
I want to add, anxiety management is such an important part of test taking. So learn ways to manage your own anxiety, but then also read up what the test taking site, if you've managed to sign up for a test taking site, read up on what the precautions you're going to need. Like, do you have to wear a mask? Can you bring in a pencil? And actually replicate that when you take your practice tests once or twice as you're leading up. So you are used to sitting there for 4 hours with a mask on, taking a test.
That's a good point.
Because if you have never experienced it until you walk in the room, you might have be breathing less and actually feel less oxygenated and have a panic attack. Like, let's practice it before so you sense what it's like. And so that's my little tip. So we're going to go. Anna asks, what are your thoughts on a therapist going through an IOP program for themselves for extra support, et cetera, after experiencing burnout and their own mental health taking a dip downwards? This is a pretty personal question, so I will defer to you how you'd like to answer that.
I think that we all need to prioritize our own mental health and safety over the work that we do. The work we do is very important.
Right.
But if the ILP program is something that you feel or that one feels would be valuable in getting your mental health to the place that you need it to be, I say do it. There's a certain amount of confidentiality and privacy, but there's also a credibility as a therapist if you're able to really walk your talk. I think clients feel it. And sometimes for marketing and different things, people will actually talk about their own journey and how that has helped them in understanding their clients. So I don't see any negatives for doing it. You have to sort out if it's right for you. But I think for me, and I just think about our colleagues who have died by suicide, to sacrifice our mental health to serve our clients, and then finally never be able to provide service again. That if this is how you're going to be able to take care of yourself, please do that.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. So we're going to go to Caitlin's question. I'm looking into obtaining my own therapist, but I'm getting caught up in seeing local providers who could potentially be colleagues or at places I would like to explore working in the future. Thoughts? I have a thought, but I'll wait till you.
Well, I think this is a great time because I think most therapists, at least in some part, are doing telehealth and they're getting pretty good at it.
Right.
And so what's happened is really there is access across the state to therapists who can help you. And so I think it's identifying through websites, web searches, kind of really opening it up to anyone online and thinking about, is that the type of therapy that you would want? Because I think that there is some real benefit to being able to have someone that's perfect for you or ideal for you that you wouldn't necessarily have sought out if they were in your local community. And so I think that's one possibility. I think for me, when I found a therapist, I specifically kind of filtered through the things that I did not want to have as a dual relationship with my therapist. And I found a therapist who I still see today. Now there's subsequently become dual relationships because we're in the same community and she's actually like a block and a half away from me. And so, but we navigate those. Yeah. I don't know if I would do the same thing now because she literally is a block and a half away from me, which makes it super easy for me to jet up there for a session at 1 when we're still in person. She's doing telehealth right now. But I think if you're really wanting to eventually do an in-person, I get that you're going to need to do that and sort through how you get not the people that you want to interact with, and potentially that's insurance providers, people who are more, they kind of do their in your networking community. But I would, at this point, if I were looking for a new therapist, I would look to see who is the therapist that speaks to my heart wherever they are in California.
Right, remote. I mean, you don't have to, you're not limited by geography. So you could get someone in Northern California if you're in the LA area, and you'll never overlap in real life, or it's so unlikely. Whereas,
well, there's even therapists who have moved out of California that have maintained their licenses in California.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of therapists that are available to us.
I want to respect people's time and your time, Katie. So I want to thank everyone. Thank you, Katie, for joining us. Thank you, attendees. And reminder that please do the survey that we have at the end, and have a chance to win a free CE workshop, 2-hour CE workshop. Our next workshop is tomorrow, noon, with Kurt Widholm on telehealth with kids and adolescents. As MFTs, we know your time is critical and your work is critical. I'm sorry we couldn't answer everyone's question. We'll do our best to get your questions answered offline. If you have legal or ethical questions or licensure related questions, which some of the questions were licensure related, please call CAMFT if you are a member. And we have our website.
If people have questions about burnout, I'm open. They can reach out to me through my social media website. Or my website, katiebernoy.com.
And thank you again to Geico, CPH, and Simple Practice for co-sponsoring this Lunch and Learn series. When this when the survey ends, when the webinar ends, you'll get a survey, 2 questions. Please complete it, and have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. Keep doing the good work for California communities that CAMFT members do. So thank you very much. Thank you, Katie.
You're welcome. It was good to be here.
Take it easy.